Hi, welcome to Observations. I'm host John Walsh. This is a special edition that we're going to be doing where we are interviewing all of the candidates for the 2021 special election for Mayor of Palm Coast. And today joining me is candidate David Alfin. Welcome, David.
Very nice to see you, John, and a pleasure to be here. And I applaud your effort to get the word out to all of our voters who we hope will come forward for the special election.
So let me talk a little bit about the process. We have standardized the conversation. The questions are going to be very much the same for each candidate. All 7 interviews will take place before any are produced and published on the podcast and our YouTube channel, Observations. So again, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So let's dive in. David, how long have you lived in Palm Coast?
So I'm approaching a decade of living here in magnificent Palm Coast. We moved here, relocated here from the mid-Hudson Valley, but before that I actually grew up in St. Pete, Florida on the West Coast. So been up and down and very happy to be back here.
So right into the next question. David, are you a U.S. citizen?
I am absolutely a U.S. citizen and very proud of it. Thank you.
And have you always been a U.S. citizen?
I have been a U.S. citizen since the day I was born and enjoyed every moment of that as well.
Great, thank you. This one's all you, David. What makes you qualified to be mayor of Palm Coast? List the top 3.
So the top 3, really very simple. When we moved to Palm Coast, I've always had a philosophy that people offer and give you things, whether they be comments, suggestions, material things throughout your life. If you were to inventory all the things that you have ever received from everyone, you would quickly realize that you could never pay it all back. I made a decision prior to moving here back to Florida and to Palm Coast that I would engage with the community and offer my service in every way I knew how.
What do you think the biggest issue facing Palm Coast is?
I think the biggest issue facing Palm Coast today is the fact that we incorporated as a city in 1999, so we're hitting that 20-year mark. And if we are not working together to plan our future carefully, we may find the tax burden becomes much too heavy for all of our single-family home owners here in Palm Coast. There are many issues that are below that issue, but being able to afford public safety, being able to repair and add new infrastructure, being able to relieve the tax burden, which is skewed unfavorably against the residential homeowner, are paramount issues that all of our residents should be concerned about and should come out to vote in the special election.
One of the biggest issues today, of course, is the fact that there's an opening as city manager. Should the city enlist the services of a professional HR group experienced in hiring executives, or should the city council go it alone and determine their own process?
So I just attended the city council workshop, which addressed that very issue. The workshop suggested that there were 4 and then perhaps a 5th possibilities. I have great confidence in the staff that is working at the city of Palm Coast.
4 or 5 possibilities. You mean candidates names that are being?
No, 4 or 5 options that the city council has to find and locate and hire a city manager.
Yes, sir.
So I have great faith in the staff and the structure of the City of Palm Coast organization. I do believe that staff would be able to campaign for a candidate that would be appropriate to fill the job as city manager of Palm Coast. I don't think that we need to hire and spend the extra money, which is significant, on a search. I think we could actually do that. I think the real important piece is when we locate several candidates that the city council vet them very carefully.
So the process left up to the council itself still needs to be identified.
It does. There has to be a transparent and a process that is in place before we begin.
So, right, setting the expectations, the requirements of that job, and getting on the same page as to what the city needs in the form of a city manager, needs to take place before the actual applicants are reviewed and so forth. So let me back up. When you said input from the staff, is that what you said, input?
Yes.
But not the end all?
Oh, no, not the end all. Input from staff, but equally important is input from the residents. Now, you're setting different benchmarks, but what do the residents want to see in a city manager? We've had only a few city managers since the city was incorporated, but what are the residents who city council actually work for? What do they want to see in a city manager? Do they want to see someone that's going to be boots on the ground, out in the field, listening to resident concerns? Do they want to see a qualified, experienced manager who's going to run the city staff in a efficient, effective manner, or perhaps some middle ground, some combination of both? But I think, John, your question is right on point. You need to decide who you're looking for before you cast the net, because this process needs to be timed and cannot go on open-ended.
Skill set, experience,
Yes.
That sort of thing.
Yes.
Things that can be actually verified and
I'll, if I may, let me add something on which is important to me. We have not been considered as business friendly as a city as we might want to be. As a result, some of the potential applicants may not look forward to a Palm Coast experience. So it's going to be doubly hard for us to convince qualified, experienced managers to come talk to us, because we're not looking for a manager that perhaps is sunsetting and looking for a nice lifestyle retirement here near the beach. We need somebody that's going to get it done.
So another issue for the city coming up is the annual budget. So if you are elected mayor, the first agenda item, I believe, that you'll be presented is the budget. So the first question I have about budget is, personally, what is the largest budget that you've managed?
So I have been president of a public company that had a budget in excess of $100 million. I've also worked for a small family business which had a budget of several $1 million. So I've had the experience of those businesses, but more importantly, here in Palm Coast in my last 10 years, I have served as treasurer for organizations like the Women's Council of Realtors, the Flagler County Education Foundation, the Flagler County Association of Realtors. So I've actually been a treasurer for many of our local organizations, so I understand what the budget means here locally. I'm a fiscal conservative, so fiscal conservancy is sort of my middle name.
It's been my experience that most candidates use that as a platform or part of their platform during their campaign, that you're going to go through the budget line item by line item. But my question is, how do you know, looking at just a number, whether it's in line or out of line?
Well, I mean, the accounting technique is to look at past periods of performance to see if there's an outlier or something like that. At the same time, with an eye on the future. In other words, perhaps it's skewed that way for a good reason. So the answer to your question is, it takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to go through the budget process, which, by the way, will actually begin just before this election.
The process itself is
Within
already
the city, correct.
Right. They're already working on the budget. I understand that. So recently there were a couple of budget items that were approved by the existing or the previous administration, if you would, existing and previous. How's that? First one is, would you propose to defund MedNext?
Well, let me say it this way. I'm a huge supporter of the MedNext initiative. I wouldn't confine it just to MedNext, because the MedNext initiative becomes a multiplier of revenue source and business relocation to our area. So I am running my campaign very much in favor of moving that initiative forward.
That's great. Another item that was recently approved was over $5 million for phase one of the tennis center. Would you vote to defund the tennis center?
So my problem with the tennis center discussion thus far is I've heard a lot of back and forth amongst city council and the residents and stakeholders. No one has stepped forward to offer an ROI, a return on investment. So I'm not ever opposed to spending money or investing in a project as long as I can see up front a calculated return on investment. What is that project going to bring back to the citizens and the residents of Palm Coast? If I don't know that, I can't really consider it. So with no ROI in place at this time, I think it would be a two-part answer. One is, let's figure out if in fact it brings an ROI that's acceptable. And then number two, decide whether it's a feasible project or not.
Great answer. Thank you. Another component of budget are taxes. Do you feel our taxes are too high, too low, or just right here in Palm Coast?
So taxes are always too high. I mean, there's no question about that. However, what we have to look at is, again, as the city has now aged and hit the 20-year mark, we do have to be cognizant that repair, upgrade, and new infrastructure needs to be put in place. I will tell you this, that the impact fees that are in place, which they call them fees, but they are in fact an additional tax, are not always enough to make up the difference. So we have to be smart and we have to be very careful with our expenditures to make sure that the current tax dollars that our residents are paying keep the quality of life and the quality of the infrastructure of Palm Coast rolling forward.
Great, thank you. Let's move on to housing. Housing is a sensitive issue, topic, not only here, but throughout the region. Palm Coast was created one house at a time. The Florida State Chamber is predicting that population here in Palm Coast will increase 20 to 30,000 residents over the next 5 to 10 years. Do you think it's a choice between urban sprawl or high-density housing?
Absolutely not. That's not the correct way to phrase the future. And let me give you an example. I'm proud to share that my youngest, my daughter, graduated from UCF just 3 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's almost like a pay raise, right? So everybody's been through school now. However, on her own volition and without any urging from mom and dad, she decided to move back to Palm Coast. She decided to come to Palm Coast to start a career. She has it in her mind to have a career here, and she's landed a job and has great expectations for what the city of Palm Coast can offer her as a 22-year-old college graduate. Now, I'm very excited about that because the next wave of young people coming to Palm Coast will need housing. So let's get to the housing question now. So today, it would be very difficult for her to afford a home by herself with a mortgage here in Palm Coast. So I would seriously look at housing options that would allow someone like my daughter to invest in, buy a home, and be here for the long term.
The word diversity in housing, does it necessarily mean low income?
Not at all. I mean, the diversity in the housing example I just gave you is I'm, 3.5 times older than my daughter, so that represents a great diversion between the two of us.
Sure. Thank you, David. Moving on to the next topic, public safety. Flagler County Sheriff's Office reports that when compared to other communities our size, staffing levels of deputies is too low by an estimated 40 deputies. Are you satisfied with the current public safety and the current crime levels?
I think I would agree with Sheriff Staley that he has done a remarkable job in improving public safety during his tenure as sheriff. However, he's also quick to say that we can do better. I will say this, his numbers and his ratings are so high, it's kind of like the law of diminishing returns. To close that gap gets harder and harder the closer you get to the top. I will tell you this, my family is very involved and committed to law enforcement. I have 3 sons. My oldest son is a police detective in South Florida. My middle son, FBI special agent, and my youngest son is a pilot in the Army. So what I would say to the audience is this. So my family helps us all sleep better at night. So the question I have for myself is, how can I do less than to?
Moving on to the next topic, mental health. The pandemic has affected many people in many ways. Flagler County was already underserved in mental health services. Palm Coast was already underserved in mental health services. So do you think the city of Palm Coast should address and invest in mental health services for our community?
The answer is yes, and here's why I feel so strongly about that. I'm very excited about Advent Health's new initiative. They have a new program which will begin to make mental health services available. But I can tell you this, having spoken to residents, if you were to call, if your doctor, if your primary, prescribed for you to go see, let's say, a psychiatrist, and you called on your insurance to make an appointment, you could not get an appointment within the city limits of Palm Coast. That's a fact. I've just heard about that. So it leads me to believe that, yes, the city would have to weigh in. Perhaps, I'm not sure about the investment side because I don't know, again, I'm a numbers guy, at what level it would be, but I do know that the city would have to push the initiative forward so that the stakeholders behind it could support an initiative like that. Very important, I think, for the community.
Great answer. Next topic, economic development. You talked a little bit earlier in this interview about the imbalance on tax diversity, the burden on residents. What is the role of the city when it comes to economic development?
So right off the bat, economic development is a very broad, probably overused term. So let's narrow it down just a little bit. The city should be responsible for identifying, locating, and assisting in the relocation of large but small businesses to the Palm Coast marketplace. That's the first way to begin to lessen the burden of tax payment from the residential homeowners to businesses. Don't mistake that for bringing large corporations here that require significant and expensive infrastructure. Probably not going to happen, but lots and lots of small businesses is what this country is made up of. So I think that's the initiative here.
A local topic comes up every several years, and they label it economic development. Do you support allowing commercial vehicles to be parked in the driveways, including signs, after business hours?
It's such an interesting issue because it's being debated out in the public by survey right now. It's being debated up on the dais at the city council. So I think my position is simply this. I am first, last, and always a property rights advocate. So if I own a piece of property, I have certain rights to it. If you own a piece of property, you also have similar rights. What's important to me is that both owners share equally in the outcome of their property rights. Very important. That's hedging a little bit. So I would say this. I would be in favor of allowing commercial vehicles to park in driveways, provided there were a significant list of requirements on what type of vehicle, what size of vehicle, what condition of vehicle, what kind of permit, and on and on and on, to be sure that the property owners in that same neighborhood would not suffer any value depreciation because of it. And I would also add to that, I'm sorry, John, we currently have precedent. The sheriff's office currently allows marked vehicles to be parked in residential neighborhoods. Most people think that's a plus. I think we can also learn from that, and if it's done well, we can enjoy property values that are not negatively affected by that kind of code.
It's not an easy topic. People move here for quality of life. Businesses that have located here understand or should understand that there are rules. And by moving here, they accept those rules. So back to your point on my freedom stops where your freedom starts. So the quality of life issue versus commercial vehicle issue, very sensitive. Good luck with that one.
It is, and yes. So, and I'm right out of the box with my answer because I've thought about it very carefully. I've actually been through the discussion on this topic, several years ago when it came around the first time. People may not be aware that this is not the first time this discussion is happening. I've been around the block on it a couple times, and I've changed my stance over the years. So that's why I'm sharing that with you today. And I think it is important that we move forward. Your point is very well taken. Residents may not understand that the city of Palm Coast itself is considered, from a real estate perspective, a deed-restricted community. We often use that term to talk about, gated communities or other types of special HOA communities. Well, in fact, the city of Palm Coast is a deed-restricted community, which is why those codes are in place. And yes, a buyer should be made well aware of that before they actually purchase a house. So that's a pet peeve I have with my own peers in the real estate business, to make sure that you educate buyers on what they're buying into. Very important.
Community decisiveness. How would you balance the recommendation of city staff when they seem at odds with a local minority's opinion at a city meeting?
So I think that's a flag for city council members. So there's a disconnect somewhere between residents and with city staff. So that's the time when you put boots on the ground and you go out and you find out, why is there a disconnect here? Collaboration, consensus, and community confidence are my platform. So once again, I call them the 4 C's. So you've got, first you collaborate in order to form consensus. And once you've found consensus, then you can earn community confidence. And that requires getting out and finding out what is the disconnect.
Great formula. So the last question, David, if elected mayor, what do you hope you will be remembered for?
Well, this is not a legacy kind of job. This is a job to, in my mind, pay the service that I feel I want to invest in the city of Palm Coast. This is a job that comes at a very special time in the history of the city of Palm Coast. We are, in fact, on the doorstep of the greatest opportunity that the city of Palm Coast has ever had in front of it. We have political leaders which are ascending through the ranks in Tallahassee. We have initiatives that are getting ready to come out of the ground. And trust me on this, maybe perhaps the graphic image is on the merry-go-round, where, if you'll all remember, where there was a golden ring. Well, you're on the ride and you're going to get one shot at grabbing that ring. That merry-go-round will never go around again. If we do not accept and take advantage of this opportunity, we will never see it again. That's why I'm running for the mayor of Palm Coast.
Great, thank you. Anything you'd like to add and close with?
I appreciate your getting the word out. So yes, I would always like to close. It's very important that every voter understand the importance of this special election. And please, you can vote by mail, you can early vote, or you can vote at the polls. Please make the effort to vote. It's going to make a difference for all of our futures. So thank you.
Thank you.
This special election podcast is brought to you by the Joe Mullins Companies. Live, shop, play.